We've got it.
All right. All right. Well, greetings, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to spend some time with you today, talking about something that's becoming more and more an important aspect that we need to look at as we move in the future. Pathway of Hope fundraising. A very interesting aspect of here is the fact that, when you look at planning and preparation, we all know, what to do to take into account to get everything ready to go. However, sometimes life throws things at you a little bit differently. Stan Kelly and I were planning on being able to make this presentation together, but as some of you may be aware of, that Eric Bond, who's the husband of our own Assistant Development Director, Faith Colas, died unexpectedly last week. So Stan is involved in being with the family and some of the services for him this week. So he's not available, and since people had already registered, we didn't feel it was appropriate to delay this presentation. So he went through the documents and trusted over to me to be able to complete this. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a fairly complete application of the materials we have here and be able to give you some information to go forward with. This is a new and exciting opportunity for us, and we hope that it will really be a good process going forward. A little background here is the fact that as we look at introducing the topic, there's a whole concept of the Pathway of Hope fundraising and where to go from there. Back in late July, Major Merritt, our divisional commander, received an invitation, as did his 9 peers, to bring his divisional development director and divisional social service director with him to an all-day meeting at THQ with Commissioner Seiler and staff. And as all of us know who are involved with the Army, when the commissioner speaks, everyone listens. So it was a pretty full meeting with all 3 of us attending for the day at THQ, and all 10 divisions were represented there to be able to discuss things about Pathway of Hope and be able to look at identifying things together. So it's kind of unprecedented that to identify a meeting to take place that had about 3 weeks notice, and that we were all just expected to clear our calendars and go from that standpoint, and amazingly we all did that. So that as part of that also is there were presentations from the territorial staff about things that are available as far as the Pathway of Hope with regard to materials, with regard to accomplishments with Pathway of Hope, but then also things to do as far as for fundraising. As a result of those discussions that happened in the morning, then the afternoon, each divisional grouping was responsible to come up with a plan of action that we were required to present to the rest of the group before the end of the day, and then provide that to the commissioner's staff as we went home. That is our plan of action then for the coming period of time. So it has a lot of interest and emphasis from the territorial staff. It was spoken that we had our steps meeting here just this week, and that was one of the key things that Commissioner Seiler was very interested in, is where we were going and how we can do in the future as far as for following the plan that we've identified. So it's an important aspect that we are looking forward to being able to follow through with. I think it's something that will be very good for us in the future. Now, a little bit of background as far as for fundraising in the Army, because I know I've got a few folks here that are fundraisers in the group, but I also have a few people that aren't involved with fundraising at all. So just to kind of give you a fundraising 101 with the Salvation Army. Historically, we've always had planned giving people, which really focus on legacy funds. They're the ones that go out and identify wills, they identify trusts, looking at future needs for the Army as far as for the, they have sometimes gotten direct gifts from people, but their real emphasis is to look at the legacy funds, those funds that are coming back, and those are the ones that we use often for capital needs. Those things are what we develop our trust funds for, to work from that standpoint. Their priority is not the major gifts, which is the here and now. Here and now has typically been divisional headquarters towns, or where major gifts people always are resided at, and that was pretty much it throughout the divisions in divisions I've been involved with, and then others that I've also had contact with, it's been the same thing. That's where there was one or two people assigned in a division that had an office with the divisional headquarters and would focus on pretty much the here and now. They'd be soliciting foundations, corporations, large donors, and working from that standpoint. Then the third arm of fundraising, often as far as in reaching out to people, is the core development staff. And the core development staff really focus on local needs, but they're kind of a jack of all trades. Our development directors in the core basically do some planned giving. They do some major gifts as far as for writing grants and applications to foundations, corporations. They meet with donors. They often are involved in bell ringing. They do some public relations work, and the list goes on of the additional duties that are often assigned to a core development director. Now then, in looking at that, though, the territory has identified that we need to do more. That we have an untapped resource that we haven't really taken advantage of yet. So the territory has actually launched a major gifts campaign and have actually increased funding to be able to put additional major gift staff in every single division. And these are not just for divisional headquarters. There's a few staff that are going to be based at divisional headquarters, but at the same point, they're also going to be forward deployed out in actual core locations. And we have a few of those already taking place here in the division. So that is a very positive thing we're looking at, trying to expand the resources that are available for you in the local core, because we know many of you are balancing several balls that you're juggling at the same time, and fundraising just happens to be an additional one. So we're hoping to have some major gifts people that can help you in that aspect and move forward with that. Now, Pathway of Hope funding has been very interesting. Initially, we started in 2012 with our Green Bay folks as part of the territorial initiative when we wanted to launch Pathway of Hope, and that there was no funding at all initially for Pathway of Hope. It was a matter of we had a pie-in-the-sky idea that if we come up with a great program and people join it, they're going to take people off of our rolls, and we can increase our efforts, but not have to have any more expenditures submitted. We quickly realized that was not possible, and that we needed to provide some infrastructure. So in 2013, when we started with our first few core, we actually, the territory provided money to us at that point in time so that we could bring on divisional Pathway of Hope coordinators, and they actually planned on being able to provide assistance for the first 5 years to be able to keep that person in place so we could really emphasize getting Pathway of Hope started. Now then in 2014, 2015, the territory embarked upon a national grant with Lilly Foundation and was awarded a huge grant to the territory, and that's when we began really expanding. That's when we got our second Pathway of Hope coordinator here in the division. That's when SIMS, the Salvation Army Management Information System, was launched, and we started doing things in Pathway of Hope with the SIMS system. That's when we started getting more people at the territory to evaluate documentation and work from that standpoint. But they didn't just stop there. They also came out to each division and were willing to pay up to a 1.0 FTE or full-time equivalent of a case manager in each division that was paid for directly by the territory. In this division, we actually were able to take that and give 2 different units a half an FTE, so we were able to partially fund that position, which helped us get 2 more staff in places we may not have been able to get that in place in the past. So that was a good start from there. But as we move forward, we're looking at the fact that we're going to need additional support. The Lilly grant is now done, and now then we need to look at how can we continue to fund the things we want to be able to keep going at. We like the activity we're working with, and we like the way we're being able to make an impact with people, but we can't do it without the dollars. So that we're also looking at how can we really focus on getting that additional funding. Now then, many of you already know that we have had some really good successes with Pathway of Hope. And just to reiterate a few of those things that have been positive throughout just the division alone is in the division this year alone, we've had 111 new families that have been recruited to be involved with Pathway of Hope. And when you consider the fact that we've had 255 families, so almost half of the families that we have in Pathway of Hope now, matches what we did in the first 3 years of Pathway of Hope. So I really applaud the staff that are and the officers out there that are really working to get Pathway of Hope launched, because this really makes a difference as we get more and more families involved with that. I think that's a key element from there, is the fact that we are reaching out to more, and people are making a commitment to do that. You know, families are having successes too. I think that's an important part. Almost half of the people that have gone through Pathway of Hope have reduced their barriers, and we know that's one of the key elements to look at. They're identifying increased stability, they're accomplishing goals, and they're reporting they have increased hope, which is one of the things that we identified from the very beginning. Now then, often people become feel like they're being very successful, so they'll leave us before they actually accomplish everything. But at the same point, we know they're making successes. So we are happy with that, and we celebrate with those people that are making successes. And that part of our job is to try to make sure that we continue to get all the documentation forward, so we can actually have more completions complete with Pathway of Hope. Now, it's interesting when you look at the next bullet down there. 14 units here in the division have had more than a 100% increase in recruitment this year, and that's just outstanding. The fact that people have stepped up to be able to get more families involved with Pathway of Hope, and 19 of our units have actually had an increase of some sort from what they had in previous years. So it's definitely a fact that Pathway of Hope is pretty much here to stay, and I think that we're seeing some of the rewards that we've identified in the past, and that's a key process in moving forward with Pathway of Hope. And that's where we want to be able to take the next step, is identifying how we can put that into maybe some funding situations that will help in the future. Now, we have provided a little bit of funding to you in the past, but very little, and we realize that. The territory, as I mentioned with the Lilly grant, actually provided funding for Pathway of Hope case managers. So we actually were able to have a couple of case managers be partially funded by the territory as part of that Lilly grant. We also got some funding from the territory that we were able to utilize to give out some incentive grants this last year, and 22 units have taken advantage of those core grants that were made available to you this year. And those were things like enhanced client services, or maybe core involvement, tying in additional resources with maybe women's ministries or other activities from that standpoint, or for recruitment to focus on doing a learning activity or something to be able to work folks from that standpoint. So those are some key elements that have been a very positive thing for us from that standpoint. I think at the same point, we looked at as far as we identified this past year, we did a staff recruitment incentive, and that there's some caseworkers out there that we were able to recognize over the past 6 months that as we do a gift card drawing each month and take those that have new clients in this month, that we're able to move forward with them and be able to help out as far as for giving them recognition for the work they've done. But more is possible. It goes back to Willy Wonka and I want more. I think that's where it ties into us quite a lot with our efforts here. So what we're looking at is, what can we do as a division to move forward? We know the territory is trying to raise funds, but we want to do more as an individual division to really support you as fully as possible. As part of that strategic planning summit that the Pathway of Hope Summit that we did with the territorial commander, here are some things we identified that we're going to really focus on to be able to work at. One is the divisional initiative to raise funds to complement our funding needs divisionally and locally. We're not just going to raise funds to use here in-house, but we're going to use funds to be able to actually access being able to provide funds to you to be able to utilize in the various units. We've already identified that we're seeking $500,000 in new funds this year. So by October of 2017, our goal is to basically to complement our Pathway of Hope funds by that $500,000. 300,000 of it are presently already in work in RFPs we submitted to corporations. So we're well on the way of working from that standpoint. We'll be identifying with some corporations and also with some large donors, but we're going to wait until after the Christmas for that, for obvious reasons, so we can make sure that we don't hurt one aspect by going after another aspect. As part of that initiative is we're identifying that those funds are going to be twofold. Part of it is obviously these will be funds to be able to keep all the expenses required for Carrie and Rachel as far as for our Divisional Pathway of Hope coordinators, but also for the regional trainings and the consultations we do when we come out and help with the various aspects. But also we've identified, and the divisional commander has supported the fact that we want to make available through grants to CORE enough funding to be able to have each unit have a half of their Pathway of Hope case manager partially funded by these additional funds. So that would be a matter of having every unit have an availability to be able to have half of their Pathway of Hope case manager or one of their case managers to be funded by out of this pool. So we're in hopes that by giving you some additional staff funding there, perhaps you can utilize some other funding to be able to provide more incentives for clients to be able to do other things in local aspects to be able to really focus on helping to work with the families that we deal with. Now, some specific targets we're looking at is there's a couple, three things that we really want to focus on. United Way is just one aspect we want to look at, just as an example. This is not the only way we can work, but I think it's a good example to really bring to mind. Pathway of Hope and the community impact model, which all of you know is the way United Way is going, really have much in common, and we want to kind of align our languages toward that. You know that the community impact model talks about things like evidence-based practice. The Arizona model self-sufficiency matrix that we use as we are identifying how clients are being successful is one of those things that's considered an evidence-based practice and evaluation method. So we have one of our tools that we're already utilizing ties into that. The Hearth Hope Index and the change assessment that we utilize as far as for some of our assessment processes, those things are also tied into that language of being evidence-based practice. That's a common language that a lot of corporations and a lot of foundations are looking at, and I think it's very important for us to be able to tie in those as much as possible, because the more that we can identify those type of things in our activities, the better off it is. Sorry about that, I just jumped screens on you there. So one of the things we really want to focus on is identifying ways to be able to tie that in, to use that language in the same place. And we're actually looking at some of the United Way language and refining some verbiage that we'll be able to provide to you for that. The whole idea of the self-sufficiency matrix aligns with United Way's desire for objective evaluations and outcome measures, so we can actually make concrete processes that actually can be in our reports and our documentation that we actually present when they come out for the evaluations or when we do our reports. The whole Pathway of Hope documentation process and assessment process aligns with our desires for capacity building. And capacity building for families and communities has been a key element in United Way going to the community impact model. This is one of the things that we can really focus on how we're helping to educate and teach families. So it's a matter of identifying and placing our language in a way that fits together with that. I think that's a key element that as we move forward is to be able to tie in that language in the right direction. So we're currently looking at some of the United Way documentation and some of the Pathway of Hope documentation and refining some of the language so it overlays with each other more clearly. Now there's some resources and some things that are available also for you that will be helpful. We have the outcome reports that we can collect and create on a regular basis to give you as far as for the successes that you're having locally, as well as the successes that we're having as a division. So you can be able to identify with the breadth of what the Pathway of Hope initiative is doing within Wisconsin, Upper Michigan. In addition, we can also pull up some of the territorial reports to give you an aspect where we can actually compare local numbers to the same type of numbers that are going across the 10-state region. And that can be a very important aspect to show when you're doing a foundation or identifying with the United Way that this is something that we're doing as an initiative that's bigger than just my small community. And that's one of the aspects we've looked at from that standpoint to demonstrate that our activities are bigger than just a Beloit, for example, or maybe just a Marinette, that we can demonstrate that we're having the successes we're having locally on a divisional and a territorial breadth of experience. And that will make a huge difference, I think, as you do your applications. Now, in addition, there's also some narratives as far as for grant preparation and some outreach to funders that's available both from a territorial and national perspective, as Pathway of Hope has now gone nationwide. Those things are identified in the Pathway of Hope database, and they're also available through some things through the development department. The new territorial Pathway of Hope website, and we'll send that link out to you if you haven't received it already, is active and is available as resources and information. It's actually an excellent website that provides some good information and really is an easy website to navigate and is a great way to be able to identify with a potential funder of what the Salvation Army is doing from a Pathway of Hope. We will send the link for that out so you can be able to take a look at that website and see how it will benefit you in the work that you're doing locally. In addition, in your Lotus Notes database, we have a Pathway of Hope resources database. It's totally by itself. This section here has an entire section that focuses strictly on the fundraising summit that we held in August. So it covers some of the information that was covered there. As far as for a lot of informational materials, some testimonials and outcome reports are available there for you to utilize from that standpoint. So there's a wealth of information I think will be of benefit to folks as you look at trying to come up with some local resources and some local funding. Now, obviously, there's a next steps portion. What we will do is, as we are having successes with those corporations and foundations that we're reaching out to, as we have successful attempts, or as we don't have successful attempts, we'll let you know as a division which things worked, which ones didn't work, so we can have a good best practices established to be able to work from that standpoint. One of the things that, as Stan and I have talked back and forth, is that we really need to make sure that our individual corps really coordinate with Stan's department in development on any proposals that you're submitting. We actually can help assist and facilitate the fact that we're getting current and concrete data in place for there, and it gives us a chance to be able to not have to recreate the wheel in 26 different locations. So we're really focusing on that. His department is already working on developing a standardized foundation, a corporation solicitation template, and that will make it easier to be able to plug things in to work from that standpoint. And then we can help you plug in items based upon your community or based upon a region. So as we're moving forward, I think one of the important things that we're looking at is the fact that Pathway of Hope has had some successes, But if we want to have more successes, we really need to look at how can we continue to fund it to move forward. I think that some of the areas that we've had some success in are also some areas that we can be able to identify as far as for potential funders, and at the same point, I think that gives us an opportunity to be able to identify ways to move forward with various aspects of funding opportunities. We've already known in talking with some of our foundations and some of our large donors, they're excited about Pathway of Hope. They see it as a departure from what we've done in the past, and based upon that, it's kind of like striking when the iron's hot. There's a good opportunity for us to get some additional funds there to work forward, but at the same point, we want to make sure that we can try to maximize those efforts as much as possible. So with that information, that catches you up with what we've been doing here at DHQ, and that I think at this point in time, I'd love to entertain any questions that you have as far as we move forward with Pathway of Hope and looking at fundraising opportunities, any ideas you might have or any questions you may have. I think if Rachel wants to open it up for questions,
Sure.
Now would be a good time.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type those into the chat box. I don't have any yet, so we'll just hang tight for a few minutes in semi-awkward silence while we wait for you. All right, here is a question. Has this information been shared with core officers prior to this webinar?
No, as a matter of fact, this is our first attempt at this as a result of the three of us attending the summit here just a couple weeks ago. That in our conversation with Major Merritt, we suggested perhaps we could develop a webinar that would get some initial information, and then we can share it from that standpoint. Here in a couple weeks is going to be the officers' councils, where Major Merritt will be with all the officers, and we'll talk about it more in depth at that point in time. But we want to make sure to get this information out so people were aware of it, partly because of the fact that this is often a time when we start soliciting for new funds in different areas. So we want to be able to ensure that we're being thoughtful and intentional about how we're looking for soliciting funds, so that we don't ask for one thing when we could ask for something more. You know, it's really frustrating if we ask for $10 and we could have gotten 100. We don't want to be able to shortchange ourselves.
And all of the officers were informed of the webinar, but it was short notice due to some circumstances on our end, so they'll have access to this recording. That's why we've recorded it. So, and then we have another question: is how does the territory compare with other territories across the country in support for POH?
Okay, actually, that's a pretty easy comparison. The Central Territory, we've been doing Pathway of Hope now for 4 years. The other 3 territories are just in their first year of Pathway of Hope. And as many of you remember, when we started with Pathway of Hope, there were some learning curves. Obviously, most of the other territories are able to eliminate some of those learning curves because of the experiences we were able to share with them. But there's a little bit slower in many of the other locations, just because of the fact that they're still trying to get the feet on the ground. Our territorial support and the buy-in from the local communities is a lot higher than it is in many of the other locations at this point in time. However, National Headquarters has identified a specific office for Pathway of Hope and is working with all 4 territories to try to bring everybody together at the same speed, so that we still lead the way in experiences, but at the same point, there's as much interest in all the three territories as there is in the Central Territory in making Pathway of Hope a success.
Okay, any other questions anyone has? Feel free to type those in.
Just as a refresher and reiteration, you know, that typically when you're doing local grants, that there's often not a requirement to work with the development department if it's just a local foundation. But at the same point, if we're trying to tie in things with our efforts with the Pathway of Hope, in your applications, we'd ask that you do work with us so we make sure that we are saying things the same throughout the division, because it does make a difference as we try to make applications that we speak the same language all the way across. So I know that's a little bit different than we often do with most of our local foundations, but at the same point, I think it'll give us a stronger methodology going forward, and I think it'll help your successes in trying to do some of your local foundations as well, to be able to have that additional information to provide.
All right, we don't have any other questions, so I guess if you have any final words, Kevin, otherwise we can hang up and finish up for the day.
Well, I think the biggest thing that I see is the fact that I know Major Merritt and Stan and I are extremely committed to going forward with this. Major Merritt, as you know, was a Corps officer in Rockford, Illinois, that really saw Pathway of Hope as an important aspect, as he was a Corps officer. He was actually on a committee with me over the last couple of years, looking at ways that we can make Pathway of Hope better. So he has been committed from the very beginning to go forward, and I think that's a key element as we move forward. The fact that he's committed to making it successful, and that with that from the top, and that with the Development Department, Social Services Department, that are both committed to helping you folks be more successful in getting additional funding and being able to make Pathway of Hope speak to your communities. I'm hopeful that we can come up with a great solution to be able to go forward.
All right, well, we will go ahead and end for today. We will have the recording sent out to anyone who logged in within the next couple days, and if you can make sure you please fill out the feedback survey very quickly when you log off, that'd be great. So, thanks, everyone.